as Alan was saying, my name is Taryn the Wayward. I am a brand new Collegium. I've had it for a week. So watch out, there is a cord here.
Yes, that's what I was working toward.
And you are at it for shower.
See you later.
See you.
I'm gonna go check
Thank
in.
you.
I gotta go check in.
Okay. Glasses.
Oh, did I leave a pair?
Yep.
Yeah, I got too many. I'm carrying 3.
So I did not print handouts, so my apologies for that. We're really going to be talking about persona development and a little bit. I'm not sure how much Alan was talking a lot about the what's a herald, and it sounds like a lot of getting what is a herald and how to get through that idea. Is that right? Not really not really designing heraldry kind of thing.
No, he didn't get into design.
Okay, so we're not going to get into designing heraldry either, but we're going to try and at least talk a bit here. Make sure this is forward. Okay, so not go from there. So my name is Taryn. I'm Magister Taryn the Wayward. It takes some time to get used to. Companion of the Order of the Laurel, or Order of the Pelican. I'm a herald at large here in Meridies. Originally, I'm from Adenvelt, so from Arizona originally. I currently live in Oakbourne Keep, which is Tuscaloosa, and the founder of Wayward Manor House, which is a household built around Burgundy, so the Kingdom of Burgundy, which is now modern day France. In 1390, I tend to do a little bit of heraldic shenanigans and such. The idea of personas, it's really the idea of who are you, right? When we get into the SCA, when we start in the SCA, so Taryn the Wayward is 14th century Burgundian, a 14th century Burgundian herald. Jim Meadows is a 47-year-old doctoral student and a social worker. So, put on the funny clothes. I want to kind of leave that modern world behind as much as possible. So that's where the idea of the persona comes from. We don't create a persona that we create is not the same as who we are as a person day to day. And we try to keep those two things separate, at least a little bit. That's why when you try and register a name, you can't register your own name because that person was born in the 20th century. Yeah, you're over 20, so you were born in the 20th century. You were still 20th century too. You're a little older than that. But the idea behind the persona and who we are in the SCA, we want to know who you are and what's your name in the society, where you're from, and if you have ideas of a persona, where are you? When are you from? Where are you from? What was your social class? And do you have a quick one-sentence biography? Quite honestly, that's probably the biggest for most people in the SCA. That's the biggest thing about a persona is where they're from and when they're from, and beyond that, a lot of us are who we are. So some ideas of facts and fables within the SCA persona and SCA heraldry sides. You'll hear a bunch of things that apply. Some things that we get told all the time. Your SCA membership card registers your name, right? The biggest part of a persona, right? It's the name. For most of us, for a lot of people, that's as far as they go to a persona, is they just register an SCA name. That's it. Your SCA membership, so you'll hear these things that, oh, you've got it on your membership card, and therefore it is your registered name. No, that is not registering a name. That is, you can put anything on your membership card. That they don't check it, and nobody checks anything with that. There will be a name on your membership card. So he mentioned that you're relatively new. Is this the first event, or has this been second or so? Okay. So so this will be a lot of information that would be appropriate for you with this. I'm trying to keep it very appropriate. Hey there, please.
Sign-up sheet? Did
There is a
Alan
sign-up
leave
sheet.
his?
Alan did not leave his.
Okay.
I think he took it with him.
Okay, then he's lost it somewhere between here and there. Thank you.
Because this one is not. No, wait, do you guys have a sign-up sheet over there still, or is this? Oh wait, no, we do have them here.
There's his.
So there are two of them here. One which is filled in, and neither one has the class information on it.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Sure deal. So we don't have. I mean, putting it on your membership card does not register the name. But people also will say you must have a registered name and a registered armory to play. No. You do not. It's encouraged, but you do not. It is not forced that people have register a device, a name or a device. It's not a requirement to play. You must have a registered persona. No. You don't have to. You don't have to have a registered persona to participate. Another one of our favorites is that the College of Arms registers personas. No, we don't register personas. And that and the last one is that your persona must match your registered name and your armory. All of those, none of those are true. The way that some of the biggest part of that, the only requirement to participate in the SCA. This is from the governing documents. Article 2B, the requirements for participation in society events. And this is the words, this is the gospel according to the organization. Anyone may attend society events provided he or she wears an attempt at pre-17th century clothing. All participants are expected to behave as ladies or gentlemen, gentle persons of a European court. That is it. That is the requirement to participate. Membership is not required to participate at an event. You are not required to have a membership. You are not required to have your name or your artistry or your armory or persona or any consistency. None of those are required to participate in an SCA event. A reasonable attempt at pre-17th century clothing. That is a really, really large phrase. I wear a lot of bling and a lot of stuff. That's my level of an attempt. Other people's levels of attempts. I know of I went to an event where a gentleman didn't have the ability to sew, didn't have a lot of fabric, but he had a plaid bath towel. He wrapped it around, put that plaid towel and a belt and wore it as a kilt. He made an effort at pre-1700 clothing that was pre-17th century, pre-1600 clothing. That's enough. That's enough. Anybody else is being an elitist snob. I have been the elitist snob, and I have been. The reason that story comes out, it reminds that I remember that individual is because I was very new in the SCA. And I was, how? That's not right. That's not right. And a person who I respect very much she passed away just a couple years ago. She pointed out, it's like, Taryn, that is an attempt at pre-1700 clothing. That is the requirement. That is what we ask for. Anybody that's here, he's not running around in a Harley t-shirt and jeans. She's like, I saw him, that's his normal clothing. He's wearing something else. He's wearing it to be here. He belongs with us. That's the plan. An effort at pre-1700, pre-1600 clothing. That is the only requirement for participation. And I will flog anybody who gives you grief beyond that. Seriously, if somebody, that's part of my job as a peer, is if somebody is giving you grief, let me know. We'll fix it. If you're not sure if they're giving you grief, let me know. We'll check. Because this is a society, our organization is about courtesy. And if courtesy is not happening, we need to fix that. I'm a firm believer that we need to make sure that people are being friendly to everybody who plays. So, what is required is that attempt at pre-1600 clothing, and I did not bring my little clicker. So, talk about the COA, the College of Arms. So, the College of Arms, which is the society level talking about all the different heralds, we are responsible for registering names and armory. You don't have to, but we encourage it, right? And there are some ways that our rules of what we're allowed to do say that names and armory that we submit are going to be medieval, right? And we're going to give you as much help as we can, but the end result is it's on the person who's submitting it. So we're going to give you as much help as we can, but if we can't find it, the end responsibility is for the person who's submitting the name. We will give you as many resources as we possibly can. Names. So our mandate is in regards to names and heraldic usage in time and space. The rules, there are rules that are out there. We do not require consistency between your name and your armory. You can have heraldry that is very English and a name that's very Japanese or German and Japanese, doesn't matter. As long as the armory is consistent within itself and the name is consistent within itself, we're good. One of the few things that we do is we don't want to allow people, we don't want people to pretend to be famous, other famous people though. So if your name and your heraldry sounds like it's too close to somebody else, we'll check on that. And that's actually some other rules that we'll talk about later on. Not going to be working well. I don't have my clicker. So,
Oh, never mind. Projector.
PowerPoint.
Okay. Oh, crap, the lights are off. Okay.
PowerPoint.
It's on purpose.
Yeah, okay.
So we have some rule that there are. So when we talk about heralds, the heralds tends to be probably the most rules lawyer group in the organization. We're the geeks of the geeks. we're the nerds of the nerds as it stands already. We have a couple of rule books that are out there. The administrative handbook discusses our processes. It's not necessary to really need, you as an individual don't necessarily need to know it. It's much more for the other heralds that are out there. Usually it takes somebody who's been poking around at heraldry for a while to understand all of it. And the rules on names and armory comes under what's called Sena, the Standards for Evaluation of Names and Armory. That really sets what we're supposed to do for it. We have Sena was designed to take heraldry from all over Europe and figure out what is the most common set of rules. What are the common rules across it? Because every culture interprets heraldry a little bit differently. So, did Alan describe define heraldry for you last session? So basically the picture on a shield.
Right. Yeah.
Right. So it's basically what we always talk about. We hear all the time about coat of arms.
Mm-hmm.
So that is what we talk about with heraldry. There are each different every different country that has a college of heralds. They have slightly different rules, but most of the rules are there are some consistencies across there. one of the biggest rules you'll hear people talk about is called the rule of tincture. It's the no color on color, no metal on metal, is what you will hear people say. Basically, the idea is I want to be able to identify what you've got. So the color rules are all about contrast. And so I want to be able to figure out what the heck it is from a distance. And the pictures and the postures, it's shorthand. It's almost like a shorthand language in pictures. So you have some specific things that you are encouraged to do. And that's really defined in Sena. It's useful to read it, but it's not essential to read it for you as a person. So I keep saying we don't have to register a name, we don't have to register a device, we don't have to develop a persona, but we still encourage it, right? So why would we encourage it? Nearly every culture out there that has a shield on it, think about it, you got this big whopping, when you're looking at especially in the Middle Ages, right? You've got these guys that have got these helmets on. It's really hard to tell who's who when all you see is this, right? Or even more, I'm wearing my helmet and it comes down over my face, right? Like, is that Jim? Is that Joe? I mean, think about with football players, right? You look at the picture. They always put that picture of them out of their helmet and in their helmet. Or they'll have a picture of the guy. They'll have the guy on camera when they're in their helmet. You see the guy on the screen without a football helmet. Doesn't look like the same guy, right? So it's really kind of hard to identify, and that's what heraldry started with. Was the very early medieval version of identify friend or foe. It's that picture. I know that's a good person. I know who that is with that picture. And they started off with just lines and drawing and such. Every single culture that has a warrior culture that exists, that has a shield, that has this big flat shield out there, I have yet to find a single culture that didn't decorate that sucker, that didn't decorate the shield. Everybody has decorated those shields. Sometimes that becomes very individualized, or more often than not, it becomes very individualized. And while not every culture out there registered heraldry, when people get awarded arms as an award here, the common statement from that is, it's not in every one of them, but there's a common line that says, "We charge you to consult with our heralds to devise unique and suitable arms." The king is telling you, go design heraldry. Go design a name. So not every culture, so there are people that are like, well, my persona would not have heraldry. Yeah, but your persona would never defy an order from his king or his chieftain. That's my arm twist for folks.
It's as good a theory as any.
What's that?
I say it's as good a theory as any.
Well, that's the one when I've got people that are like, my persona wouldn't. Well, would your persona defy an order from a king? That most recently, that was the press gang heraldry. So this is one of the biggest reasons to do this is it in the Middle Ages, it was a sign of status that you were entitled to have arms. And in the society, everybody is at least a lesser noble, right? You are of the gentry. We are of the gentry class to begin with. In the U.S., we don't have the rigid class system that existed in feudal Europe, where there's the peasant that's always there. The only people who are peasants in the SCA are the people who want to be peasants. We're all considered to be at least lower nobility, where we'd be entitled to arms and land, and at least a little small plot of land. And as you move up with the different awards that Alan was referring to, your award of arms, your grant of arms, your patent of arms with like the pelicans and the knights and whatever else. That increases your status. So one of those rights is to have heraldry that identifies this is me. This is me and this is my stuff. So when we talk about persona specifically, the persona, like we said before, Jim is a social worker. Taryn is a herald. So your persona is basically who you see yourself as, and how perhaps how others see you in that great complex world that is the SCA, right? What's the character you're presenting? You're not necessarily, but that the name can shape your persona, and the persona can shape your name. For example, I'm very much interested in heraldry, right? I do heraldic display in a lot of different ways. I've made a cloak that I didn't bring it with me, but I made a cloak that's got of people I've worked for. I've been making heraldic maces. I do all sorts of consultations and courts and things like that. So I'm very interested in heraldry. So I also found that I really like these really fun angel wing sleeves in the clothing. So my persona was built around the things I found I really enjoy doing and the clothes I really like wearing. So these clothes are very these houplons are very 14th century. You start seeing them in England, but also in Burgundy, France. So because I like the buttons. I actually was looking for ones that are specifically with buttons. So that's where I found the clothes. I found clothing I liked, and the things I liked to do. So therefore, Taryn is a 14th century freelance herald from Burgundy. I tend to travel with a lot of accessories for my trade as a herald. That's basically my persona. I found stuff I like to do. I found clothes I like to wear. Other people, when they figure out how to decide on their persona, some people like to look at, hey, I'm really interested in this specific culture. People that I've seen that are very interested in Japanese culture, so they start building a Japanese persona, even though they don't have any other involvement. It's just an area of their research, a place that they really are interested in. Some people build their personas around their modern families, their family histories. I know friends that they've grown up their whole lives being told that their family has roots in Scotland, so they built their persona around their family history of their Scotland. There are other folks that build their persona around their activities. When people are getting started, one of the first things I recommend people do is find clothing that is available and comfortable for you, right? Elizabethan Tudor clothing is not always comfortable. I love the look of it. I can't sew it. So therefore, I'm not going to want to do that. So I don't want to do a Tudor persona if I'm never going to wear Tudor clothing.
And 14 pounds of wool in an Alabama summer is just not a good thing.
Exactly. It's like, how much wool do you want? How much linen do you want? I mean, what do you want to do with it? So the idea of picking a persona. So this is like your second event, you said?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So what have you thought about for yourself?
Well, I would want to do more of Irish, Gaelic.
Okay. Why?
Murphy is Irish.
And I'm asking because whatever your reason is the perfectly valid reason. There is no right way to do it.
Right.
There is no real wrong way to do it. Well, there is a little bit of a wrong way to do it, and I think that's kind of, we'll talk about that in a moment. But there are some resources that we have available that you can get hold of to help really refine personas. There are some people, Duke Caradoc of the Bow, which is one we'll talk about in a moment here. Duke Caradoc really gets very intense into personas. There are certain areas at things like Gulf Wars, Penzik, where you will hear it referred to as Enchanted Ground. The idea behind it is the modern world does not exist in Enchanted Ground. Most events do not have Enchanted Grounds. In fact, I think the only places I can think of anymore that really do are some of the Great Wars, right?
Penzik, Great Western War,
Estrella, I know.
sometimes Estrella.
Estrella, I know that we're developing at Gulf Wars as well.
There are
having some Enchanted Grounds.
a couple of salons are going that way, Gulf Wars.
Yep.
Yeah.
So the idea of Enchanted Ground is, as we want to be very period. Conversations about the modern world don't happen there. We don't want to have conversations about the modern world. You tend to try and be in your persona. You try to be that character of a person. So I would try to avoid the social worker stuff, but I would try and think in the world of that 14th century Herald. And there are some questions that, one of the things that this link here at the bottom are some essays and questions to think about to know for your persona. Let's see if I can get to...
Crydoc once spent 2 hours reciting his own self-written Arabic poetry to my wife because inside his ground he will not do anything except period references.
Right. So I don't have internet access in here. So if you would like, I can email this to you if you're interested. So, but he has some really good. One of this resource here at the bottom is ways to think about what your persona would know, like the types of coins that your persona would be familiar with. Do they read and write? If they do, what types of things what types of poetry or what things would they have read, or what would have been the major events in their world? What would have been the topics of conversation for them? So those are the types of things that are in that mindset to look into. But this is kind of the thing we hear a lot of people who are getting going. Every herald has heard these things. So I'm the bastard daughter of a landed noble. As an infant, I was stolen from my unmarried peasant mother by gypsies. In turn, when I was 7 years old, the gypsies sold me to the pirates as a cabin boy. My gender disguised. I sailed with them for several years until we were wrecked off the coast of the Moorish Spain. There I was rescued by an official of the Caliph's palace and taken to the harem. In the harem, I was trained into the arts and skills of pleasuring men, but kept my virtue intact. I befriended a eunuch, and eventually we escaped together from the harem, taking with us a small fortune in jewelry. We're making our way across plague-ravaged France, fleeing from the soldiers of the Caliph and trying to reach my homeland. To pay for our bed and board, I perform as a jungler in the inns, and we entertain, thus hiding the presence of the fortune we carry. I'm skilled in the use of edged weapons, proficient in exotic gypsy and Moorish music and dance, and I'm able to tell the fortunes for slit purses at need.
Wow.
Otherwise known as, I've read too many romance novels or been a gamer for too long.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Now.
This is... as heralds, we hear this all the time, and the idea is, with this type of story is, I want to throw everything about me into one story. I'm trying to figure out how to connect all of these things. It doesn't necessarily need to be that. It doesn't establish the things about this when doing persona. There's a real overlap between, like I said, because for a lot of people, the persona extends just to the name that they register. So that's where there's a lot of overlap between persona and names and armory and things like that, and the College of Heralds. A persona story does not prove that something is capable of being, it does not necessarily make it plausible in history. Our organization is as much as the organization is a 54-year-old garden party from California. So I don't know if you didn't mention this, I'm sure. So the SCA started in Berkeley, California in the 60s as a protest, it was a party that was a medieval themed party at a person's yard.
Yep.
And
Bunch of science fiction
Sci-
and fantasy author geeks got together.
Yep. Sci-fi geeks at Berkeley. And after a couple of years, there was an annual party that they had. And after a couple of years, it was too big for the backyard. So they had to rent a park. The park wouldn't rent to individuals, so they had to create an organization. The author Marion Zimmer Bradley created the name on the spot in the office and said, they said, "Are you an organization?" "Yeah, Society for Creative Anachronisms." Just popped it off the top of her head. After the first, at the end of the first, this is Berkeley in the 60s, it wasn't a party unless you had a protest. So, the end of the party, they went and protested the 20th century. So, because that's the basis of what our organization is, there still is a whole lot of, we are the 54-year-old garden party, medieval themed garden party that's existing. We're also pushing very much, at the same time, we're very much going into the historical research side. So the organization as a whole, we're kind of balancing that tightrope between both of those worlds, between the very super serious period idea and the let's have some fun still. So we want to be all those things to all people. Have you ever gone to like the Civil War reenactor groups?
Mm-hmm. Right.
Was that? Have you seen how intense some of those groups are?
Yes, I have. Yeah.
I have a cousin
They
who.
put capital letters and illumination and anal retentive.
Well, I have a cousin who is involved in that organization, and he's in a group that they do a unit that was wiped out in 1861. Okay, whatever it was, their entire unit died in 1861. He had he was given by a friend, or inherited, I believe, an 1862 Springfield rifle. Like, here is this piece of history. I'm sorry, I can't use that in my order. And it was given to him because of the Civil War reenactment group. That's wonderful. I can't use it. Why not? It's 1862. Our group died in 1861. I'd never see it. Really? So that's a little bit. That's that level of historical that some people try to get to. I'm not there. I'm not ever going to try and get to there.
They'll whip out rulers and do thread counts.
Yeah, no, not happening. So, because of that, the persona. So we have people that still have this. I want this fantasy persona story that's going to help us. Oh, that's not charging. Power plug. I didn't think about that before I started talking here.
Joys of modern technology.
What's that? Yeah, exactly. At least I still have the things. I just didn't think I was going to need it. Set this.
The irony of my being a medievalist Viking is that I'm a former computer service technician, so. You can definitely say that I have a love-hate relationship with technology.
Okay, power there, and power there. Okay. Everything's got power again. So the persona story doesn't really give us documentation of what's accurate and what's not. It'll help you discover what types of things are appropriate for you, but that's about the extent of what we're going to do. The name and the armory can help determine the persona, or your persona can help you develop your name and your armory. Inspiration, both directions is a good place, right? The name you said that you're interested in Gaelic. You got Irish and Gaelic, right? So we can go with it. We can work within that. One of the things I would recommend when we're doing that, when a person has Irish heraldry, there are those national symbols of Ireland. You wouldn't put those into your own heraldry. It's like this is the weird part that.
Not to mention, most of them also, frankly, come from late to post period.
Right. Most of those do come from there, yeah. The idea behind a device is a whole lot like a whole lot like the family couch, right? We hear about the family coats of arms. The arms are for one individual. The sons and daughters, they would not be allowed to use the same coat of arms. It's kind of like, I refer to it kind of like the family couch, right? It's the couch that's in the house, and everybody in the house is going to get the benefit of using it, but when I die, it's going to get inherited by somebody individually. It's their couch. And they get to decide who else gets to use it, and how they get to use it, right? If it's my couch, I can say this is my seat, and if you guys want to use it, you're going to use these other parts, you're going to use these other seats on it, which means I'm going to tell you what things you can use with it and how you can use it and how not. So that's kind of how that works. And Irish style heraldry has some very specific things that are a little bit different from, say, Hungarian heraldry. So that's the idea of talk to a herald to help figure out what that looks like. So getting a name and a device registered, you're going to deal with the College of Arms. The rules are the very biggest idea. Names and armory are compatible with period and in the domain of society. We deal with everything from the Big Bang to 1600. It's a whole lot of territory. Any country that had contact with Europe during this period will also deal with. So we've figured out a lot of areas that have conflict, that have interaction, but the burden of proving it is always back on the submitter. All submissions need to be period in content and the period in style, and a submission that is documented as a period practice can be acceptable even if it breaks the rules. So we have these rules of what's common across all these cultures, but we have a rule set. When something breaks the normal rules, we have a way of getting, when it's, I mentioned color on color, right? Well, red and black are both considered colors in heraldry. Germans tended to do red backgrounds and black on top of it. The whole idea of color on color is contrast, right? Well, red and black are both considered colors. It's usually metals, white and yellow. Most common is red with white on it or red with yellow on it. We can show if somebody's doing very, very persona specific, we can do heraldry that breaks the rules, but we have to show that it's appropriate to a specific time and place. So we have rules to break the rules. Name or armory will be registered no name or armory may be registered that is offensive to a significant segment of the society or the general population. So, and also no registration will be submitted for a person who claims power or status or relationships that do not exist. So what this means is that we're not going to do, there are some things that we're not comfortable seeing out there anymore. If it's, for example, swastikas, right? That is an item that is pretty offensive to a large portion of the population, right? So because of that, we're not that's something that we're not registering. Similarly with names, that we won't there are some things that will be there that we're not going to register. Things that are blatantly terms that are slanders to begin with. So the offense is one part, but the other part about these power, status, or relationships that don't exist. it gets really weird. We're not permitted to say that a person is a mythological figure, right? You cannot be a god. You cannot be a dragon slayer unless you've got proof unless you can show that dragons existed. You're probably not going to be killing dragons. We know that they're in heraldry, but we don't know. But your name, I mean, it's not, unless we can show the documentation that people were really called dragon slayer. Mm-hmm. Other than that, we're going to be doing that. We also are not going to put relationships together. Navarre, Spain, for example, has a very specific bit of heraldry, and if you put, and it's a chains across the shield, right? It's called an escarbuncle of chains, but it's chains going from the center out, and then out to a ring of chain around it. Well, that was the royal family of Navarre used that. Well, the chains themselves aren't a problem, because that's a normal charge. We could use that as long as you're not using the red and gold of it. If you do like blue with a white chain, okay, cool. But if you use blue and white chain, and then you add of Navarre on your persona, well, now you're saying that you have right to the family arms of Navarre. If you do something that's very close to that royal family, and then you add a name that says that you're part of the royal family, you're making some claims that really we might not be able to back up. Okay, so that's where that gets to be a little bit of a concern. Every word and part of the name has to be compatible with practice. So a name, we have to show that a name is consistent within a time and a place, within a couple of 100 years of it. We have a lot of name resources that we use, but different kinds of things, whether that's the names of like the parent or the parental names, Mac somebody, O somebody, like O'Shaughnessy was the son of Shaughnessy. Mac Neil is the son of Neil. Those are what's referred to as patronymics. There are other types of, not every culture does those kinds of things, right? Or the way they did it is different from place to place. So we want to make sure that you're using elements from areas. We want to make sure you're using things the right way. In the idea of cultural appropriation or cultural misappropriation, we want to make sure that the research we're doing it the right way. We don't want to do something. Cultural appropriation is usually taking things out of context without respect for the original. So we want to make sure that when we're doing things, we're doing it not as appropriation, but as appreciation. So we do it with the respect to the original, to follow the rules of the original cultures, and do that the right way, so that we can teach about that culture and learn more from that culture. Talks about name elements. We can show elements being used if they follow the rules. We can make up things as long as they follow the rules of how those types of things were created. I come from a group, the Shire of Windale. Well, that basically translates to Windy Valley, right? But it was a structure of how places were built. If it was a windy valley, the way in Middle England, it would have been a windy dale or a Windsdale. So that's how those names get combined. I'm fairly good at it, but I'm not nearly as good as others. So we've got some folks who are very good at helping people build medieval style names. When you talk about heraldry, there's like 3 different types of heralds. There's the armory heralds, there's the book heralds, and there's the voice heralds. I tend to be voice, and book heralds tend to be either armory or names. I tend to be an armory herald, and I tend to be a voice herald. I'm okay as a name herald, but not great. Next thing. Compatible naming style and grammar. All elements must be arranged to follow the rules of the period names. Again, correct based on the when and where, right? What's that, Sean? Are you bored?
I'm not voice Herald in this kingdom.
Oh, you've been voice heralding in this kingdom?
Yeah.
Okay. That's my son, so he helped me out at my elevation. He was one of my heralds for it. Offensive names. We are not using offensive names. We're not gonna do pornographic or scatological terms, magical and religious terminology, or something that mocks the beliefs of others. We're not gonna do. Derogatory terms, sexual stereotypes. We're not doing. Terms is specifically associated with social or political movements that are offensive. We're not going to be registering as well. So we try to be very careful about that. We also want to make sure that your name is different from each other because of how a lot of structured names are built, where they're son of this or such. We don't want to have it. We don't necessarily we want people to be able to know to be able to control who they want to be related to. Does that make sense? I don't want this is the entire idea of conflict with names or devices, is that's how you show relationships to people. Well, I don't want somebody I've never met living in Alaska to say that they're my son. So that's where where the idea of conflict is it gives the person with the name that's registered a little bit of control to say if you want people to look like they're related to you or not. Because not everybody has family that plays in the SCA, and some of the relationships we build tend to be very close to family. So some of those people I might be okay with saying that they're my cousins or my siblings. But I don't necessarily want somebody I don't know to be part of that, because that kind of there's that reflection on me. Make sense?
Yes, it does.
So we want to make sure that things are different enough from each other that they don't look like they're related to each other, unless people say they want to be. Again, we talked about this, that you don't want to claim statuses that you don't possess, like titles or claims of land, being magical, names that unmistakably imply identity or close relationship with a protected person or literary character. I'm not going to say that I am Terence, son of Catherine of Aragon, right? It's kind of a pretty important Catherine of Aragon is kind of a pretty important person, and I don't want to say that I'm her son means that I've got a lot of power, a lot of political pull. Not really a realistic thing. So some names might and that are otherwise forbidden are too evocative of widely known and revered protected items to be registered. Clark Kent. Kent is a English territory, right? Clark is a very common English name. Clark of Kent might be a little bit too on the nose, especially if he's got a heraldry that's blue with a yellow shield on it and a big red S. Kind of might be a little too close to that whole Superman thing, right? Or Bruce Wayne with yellow with a big black bat on it. Maybe a little too close. Armory. I'm not going to read all that to you. Basically, medieval heraldry has to look like it's medieval. We have lines, and there are ways of building heraldry that is there. You have to be able to tell what it is from a distance. And it has to be in medieval stuff. Okay? Monsters are there as long as they're monsters from the Middle Ages, right? A xenomorph from the Alien series, not something we can find in period medieval heraldry. But we know what it is. But not really there. R2D2, probably again, not something that looks like medieval heraldry. So we have ways of, we have things that we can work within that. Armory has to be fairly simple. The biggest thing is something that you can reproduce or other people can reproduce, and we want to make sure it's medieval looking. That's the biggest parts of this is make sure that stuff is medieval. And also, we don't do offensive things there either. Pornographic and scatological items or will not be registered. I mentioned medieval monsters. There is a monster called the Bonacon, right? Look, in the images, it looks like a cow with with horns that curve in on itself that are not usable for basically fighting or anything else. But the Bonacon's defense is flatulence. It can fart and knock down fields. So it farts or defecation, and basically it turns its butt to you and it just blasts the world. That's not necessarily something we want to be. That's that whole scatological thing. We know the critter existed in medieval mythology. Not something we want to necessarily put out on a shield, right? Because when we're out there wearing our funny clothes outside, and we got our shields, people are going to be driving past that don't know who we are or what we are. So we don't want to scare the neighbors, right? We don't want to scare the neighbors that much. That said, there are some things, at the same point we're not going to be doing pornographic and scatological things. There are certain things that are so prevalent that we can't really avoid. Mermaids are almost always, in medieval stuff, are almost always seen bare-breasted. You look at the Disney thing and you got the seashells. So sometimes we try to fig leaf with the seashells. We're not going to be putting disembodied parts. There was heraldry registered at one point that was testicles. That's a period medieval charge. Probably not what we want to have on a device, on a shield, especially when we're having our event in a church, right? Some things just don't want to match up. Again, it talks about those social movements that are generally offensive or religiously offensive. We try to avoid those, like burning crosses. Even though we know that there are things in the Middle Ages where I can show, I've seen a burning cross as a charge in a 14th century textbook or a armorial text. A burning cross, though, out here, not necessarily going to imply that we're nice, friendly people, right? There are some modern meanings that are very different than the medieval meaning, right? So we're going to try to avoid those problems. And again, conflicting. Again, we want people to, because that's how people showed relationship was with heraldry. Again, we don't. That's all of our rules around conflicts are. We want people to know, to be able to control who they're related to. So that's what all of this is, and how we get around building around conflicts. And again, last thing about that, presumption. We don't want you to claim powers or relationships that don't exist, right? Talked about Navarre, like we said, or Catherine of Aragon. And how we register it, you talk to your local herald, we work on designing it. In fact, I'll be doing a consultation with somebody here in the next couple of days. We figure out what's there for the desired name and the desired armory. There are some, I've got the North Shield links instead of the Meridia's links. This is a PowerPoint that was sent to me, and I've been modifying it from a friend of mine who is in North Shield. I think he is in Wisconsin. So a friend of mine who wrote this and sent it off to me. I've been adjusting as I go. I forgot that those links were in there. So yeah, do work with your local folks. They'll give you some help with it. If not, we've got other folks. So the submission process, first thing is we're going to start working on building the documentation and getting things set up. We have some good places for documentation. Wikipedia is a great place to start, but not necessarily the place to end. Heraldry.sca.org, we've got a lot of name and device references for it. The best bet is when trying to put it together, sit down with somebody who can help you with it. Sit down with a herald who does consultations, because I've been doing heraldry for over 20 years and I'm still learning. Okay. That's why I don't tend to, I will help with names, but when it gets beyond me, I grab other experts. I'm usually able to handle them, but not always. There are good sources and bad sources. Some of these are really good. Some of these things here are pretty good. Some bad ones. Wikipedia used as the only source, probably not as good of a place for name resources. Because Wikipedia and most modern textbooks, they change the spelling on names. And we want to show what's the medieval spelling versus what's the modernized spelling. Okay? Like Guinevere, for example. If you look at Guinevere, if you read modern literature, is like Guinevere. Well, the name was actually spelled Gwenffyr. So, Old English spellings versus modernized spellings, that's where Wikipedia becomes a bad thing, is that it uses the modern spellings instead of the ways that things were spelled previously. There are some books specifically on in the administrative handbook that say these are bad places. These are books that we have proved that over time we have realized that these people just pulled a bunch of garbage out and did not do actual research. This is not legitimate stuff to trust. So that's why we try to use. That's why if you use a bad source, we'll try and help with it. We'll try and help with finding better ones. And then there's some other books that are in the good books to use that most of the heralds tend to have in their libraries. After your local herald deals with it, it goes up to your Kingdom College of Heralds. We do the Kingdom. We generally do some of the big work to make sure is there obvious conflicts or there obvious problems. You give the submission to your local herald. They send it up to the Kingdom. It usually takes about 1 month. At the kingdom level, it's going to be at the Kingdom for 1 month for all of the local folks to look at it, to find out, to make sure if it's good or not. If it's good, we move it forward to the next level, which is the Society College of Heralds, where we review for all of the more esoteric issues and finding out any bizarre conflicts that we didn't know about. This takes 2 months for commentary at College of Herald, at Society, and then they write a decision letter. So they have 2 months there. There's another month where they actually look at all the submissions. There are 20 kingdoms, each of those having over 20 submissions per month. So it's a little bit of work. Every month there's like 400 pieces of heraldry going through this system. So they take a month to make the decision. They have a meeting once a month where they look at all of the submissions for the month. That meeting usually is 8 to 10 hours long for people doing this for fun. So they look at it for about a month for that meeting, and then they write up a letter that says yes or no, and then it has some proofreading. So it takes local herald. You go to your local herald. We're going to call that as month 1, right? Goes to the Kingdom. That gets reviewed for another month, so that's month 2. With the College of Arms, it's going to get commentary for another 2 months, so we're now at month 4. Decision meeting month 5. And then a couple of months of proofreading of those things, right? They go through 3 passes of proofreading. So that usually gets us to about 7 months. And then we all, once they've made the decision, we get the letter and then we send it out for information and finally get the information to the client. The moment it is on a letter of acceptance and renewal, that's the final approval or denial. So everything on this page after the LOAR, letter of acceptance and return, everything after that is just information, but the device is already registered. Okay, so as soon as a lot of times I will send things to people, and they say, "Well, when is it going to be official?" I just sent you this page, the copy that says it's approved. It's official now. It is yours. It is yours. It is yours. This was, like I said, Albert sent this, and I laughed my butt off when I saw this in there. The overall time frame usually takes about 9 months from the submission to the notification from the Laurel for this. I tend to think of things very much like having a baby, right? We'll go through a bunch of pain and frustration to start with, but at the end it'll be worthwhile and something you'll love for the rest of your life. That's my goal. Okay. Lastly, we've got some resource links here. The governing documents we've been talking about, information from the College of Arms, including the administrative handbook, the standards of names and armory, stuff from Duke Caradoc about persona development is on there, and then places to get the Known World Handbook. If you're interested, there's my contact information. The email address, TaronTheWayward@Yahoo, or you can find me on Facebook with Jim Meadows. If you want me to send this to you, do you want me to send this information to you?
Yes.
Okay. What is an email address? I'm going to steal one of Alan's. I've got one of Alan's notes here. What's an email address for you?
It's TMM
TMM
2426
6
yahoo.com.
at Yahoo.
Yes, sir.
So Tango Mike 2426.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
That's correct.
I will send this to you probably this evening. Okay.
Thank you. Yes.
And with that, that's all I got. Do you have questions, comments for me? Avoid.
No, sir.
I was like, I saw you weren't downing the caffeine, so I didn't put you to sleep yet.
No, sir. No.
Was this helpful, or was it?
Yes,
Too
yes.
much?
It sort of gave me a little bit more what I got to do and stuff and everything. Yeah.
And again, persona development. I've been playing for 20